You haven't died again? You haven't died again?
I'm going to send you the link to send them, okay?
Okay. You haven't died again?
I'm going to send you the link to send them, okay?
Okay. You haven't died again?
I'm going to send you the link to send them. It's going to go on the Keegan. Well, let me see. Here it is. Boom. Not proud of it, but that's the best I could do right this second. What do you see on your screen? Oh, yeah.
You sent it to you as a message.
Yep.
How can I
copy and paste it? Fuck Safari. I'm never using Safari again. According to what I see, I should be live. United Messages on your Mac?
Yeah, Jim, you are right here.
Oh, that's old.
I know.
You don't use it?
Not really.
Get out of it because it's not set up. Here's your phone. Just send that to yourself. Copy and paste it. Or whatever. We should use a microphone. Lay down. Shut up. Water thing. Yep, send it. There you go. There you go.
Okay.
I don't know how it works with the sound because it was like echoing. Again, it didn't do yesterday. I don't know how it works with the sound.
All right, 3.
If I talk, is your volume on?
All right, 3.
Good. Okay. Well, is it still on?
If I talk.
Okay, good. Cool. All right, so now click off of that so I don't have to hear myself. And then go to the other page and make sure everyone's signing back on or whatever. I can't really see what's going on that side.
I realize people could hear you.
I know. Sorry about the delay, everyone. We had like a massive computer issue failure for the last half hour trying to get this thing up and running. It was running perfectly last night, but for some reason today when I logged back in, it all went to shit, and we had to create a new event and a new link, and I apologize for that. We're just going to get started in a few minutes when we get everyone moved over to the new page. We're going to get started. So I see we got 2 people on here. We originally had like 16 that were on the last page. I think 12 the last time I checked. So just going to wait a minute. Three people.
Yeah, the others, one of them's me. I don't know how to.
All right. Now can you hear me? All right. Now can you hear me? All right. Shut off your volume. All right. Now can you hear me? All right. Shut off your volume. You guys can hear me, right? Okay. Thanks, Joe. All right, so I'm going to try to get started here. Sorry about the delay. Like I said, everything was set up last night, and then I just had Google Chrome crash on the Mac, and everything went to shit. So looks like our main guests are Joe Keegan and Jenny Hogue and a couple other people. So this is a presentation on what we're going to be hosting our class on next weekend, January 12th and 13th, called From the Kitchen Table to the Closing Table. Thanks again for everyone who joined. Real quick, we'll get through some of the basic stuff. I know most of the people on this live feed right now, but just a little bit of history on how this all came together is basically I started working on off-market mailers about 4 years ago after being in the REO industry for a while and doing a lot of closings. So what I realized was REO was going to start to dry up, as it has, and I still had buyers that were looking for properties, as well as I wanted to keep buying my own opportunities, and the MLS wasn't offering what I needed. So eventually met Dan Clarton at a meetup, and about a week later, we sat down, got together, and talked about what I was doing and how he could help with me. And we realized that we'd work well together in this side of the business. So we put together systems like YouTube live channels, financing and money, marketing, and we delegate a lot of those responsibilities to outsourcing to other companies at this point and other people like Joe Keegan. But right now, we have both of us basically working together to take direct mail and marketing for off-market properties back to deals that result in either wholesale opportunities or acquisitions for ourselves. So now what? We've done over 80 deals in the last few years. A lot of them are flips. We also wholesale them, we wholetail them, and we also keep them as rentals. That's just a screenshot of what we had kind of pegged out as some of our deals about this time last year. It doesn't include what we've done in the last 12 months. So I own Tanis Group Realty. For those of you who don't know me, we have about 21 brokers and 8 employees and staff. We've closed over 3,500 broker transactions. And ironically, my history is more starting in the sheriff sale niche. I was going to auctions, Kane and McHenry County and Cook County mainly, and buying properties that way, starting back in about 2001, and buying those properties and then either mainly flipping them, to be honest. Over the last almost 18 years now, I've built a portfolio of over 60 properties, started or helped start a mortgage company that I'm currently a partner in. Also own Investors Title Services with Dan Clarton, who's also on this call. We started that about a year ago. host a podcast, which I encourage you to listen to. And we also host a meetup, which Dan and I work together on. Married, got 4 kids, 1 dog, 1 cat, 13 chickens. Dan, who's my co-host today. Say hi, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
He graduated a program called Mastery, which is a local organization that hosts a real estate investing course, very intensive. He still works with them today. He also hosts along with me on the podcast on occasion and has his own meetup group as well. Like I said, we kind of share those responsibilities together, and all that movement they can hear, just so you know. Okay. So he has his own meetup group as well. He's married, 31 years. He's got 3 kids and a dog. No chickens.
No chickens.
So Dan and I own Investors Title Services together, and historically his business background is in sales, but he's an entrepreneur as well. He has an ATM business that he owns and operates today. He's also a fix and flipper and owns multiple rentals. He knows and is a guest on Andrew Holmes' radio show, and he's a 3-day business consultant along with Andrew Holmes for that mastery program we talked about earlier. He basically helps other investors get started on the right course in the Chicago area. Expert wholesaler negotiator. So real quick, we're going to talk about direct mail and some of the tips we offer to those of you that are interested in getting started in wholesaling. And tip number 1 is just do it. We run into a lot of investors that come to the meetups or contact us through the title company that it's like they'll send out one mailer and it's like one and done. But yeah, they did take some effort. Point is, just get started. Even if you handwrite your own letters and stamp them yourself and drop them in the mailbox, you got to start somewhere. So just do it. Tip number 2 is you got to be consistent. Like I said earlier, a lot of people seem to do 1 or 2 months of mailers and then they just give up. And maybe it's a budget concern. Maybe they don't see the return they expected, but it takes time. So we advise everyone, if you're going to do a campaign, start it and do it for at least 6 months. We recommend 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, and one of the other things we've talked about is, with that consistency, better to do 50 letters 10 times than 500 letters once. That's the consistency piece, right?
Right. Absolutely. Tip number 3, write your own copy. A lot of what we see is everyone is hiring the same online companies that are basically taking one message that says something like, I buy houses, or I'm interested in buying your house, in red crayon like print. And they send those out to thousands of houses throughout the Chicagoland area because we get those copies when we buy those houses. There's no originality. There's nothing unique about it. And the sellers are basically caught onto you when you've sent them that same piece 3 times in 3 months.
Well, it's not so much that you've sent it 3 times, but they've gotten the exact same copy from 4 different investors, and they put them all next to each other, and they don't know if it's a scam. They don't know who's legit. So you want to be original, I guess, is the key.
Yep. Tip number 4 is there's no best list out there. The best list is the one you commit to and actually execute on. And this is actually pretty important as well, because one of the biggest questions we also get is, what list should I mail? On the surface, it's a simple question to answer. Try absentees, try divorce list, try the eviction list. They're all out there, but the key is it doesn't really matter. Start mailing and be consistent and follow these tips we've given you, and you're going to start to get phone calls and see results. Here's just a quick list of what some of those public record lists are out there that we've mailed or we currently mail right now.
So the only thing I'd add to that, Joe, is that with the different lists, these people all have a little different situations. So the mood or maybe the attitude that you might get from somebody that's facing foreclosure might be different from somebody that has lost a loved one in the houses through the probate process. So how you're going to want to kind of handle these people with kid gloves and be sensitive to their situation changes just a little bit, perhaps between the different lists that you're sending.
Right. All right. So we're gonna touch on wholesaling for those of you who might not be unfamiliar, but we like to call ourselves particularly property acquisition specialists because we're not just wholesaling these deals. The difference being that we actually close on the majority of them, whether it's for a rental or a fix and flip. We also still assign contracts as a wholesaler would. We also double close deals depending on what that profit margin is between those closings. If we're going to sell from a seller, we write the contract to us, and then we essentially sell that contract to a third party, and that margin there is enough where it probably raised some eyebrows on everyone's face. If they saw how much money we were making in the middle, we double close, because that basically isolates all parties from each other, so they don't see what's going on in the middle. But we're going to dive into that a little bit more later on in this webinar. Also, we wholesale deals, which we're going to touch on as well, but in its simplest form means we get a good deal under contract, we close on it using private funding or our own money, and then we list it on the MLS the way it is, and we sell it to a retail buyer or another investor through the MLS. Because nobody has a bigger buyers list than the actual MLS, and that creates the most interest and the most exposure for that property. So depending on the situation, it's a good idea. So again, we're property acquisition specialists, a little bit different than wholesaling. Most importantly, though, real estate investors. So if anybody on the webinar has an opportunity that they'd like to present to us, we're buyers for both fix and flip and as landlords. And we help co-wholesale some deals as well when people need assistance. That's why we're here today to talk about it. So one of the key quotes that I always try to remind myself of, and I think it's important for everyone that is interested in investing or achieving anything in your life and having a goal, is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's a quote from Jim Rohn, and I do believe this to be true. So, if sitting around playing beer pong in your buddy's garage on a Friday night, Joe, is what you want to be like someday, then I guess keep doing it. But you want to be a good real estate investor, then keep it up and advance beyond that and surround yourself with people that are more successful than you, and undoubtedly you will become more successful. That's why we're here today again. Thus, you're in the right place today. High tide raises even the shitty boats. So we're going to show you how 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 plus deals are all possible on this side of the real estate business. And keep in mind that when you're out there, 75% of the people you're going to meet at meetups or posts you see on Facebook, or even some of the webinars or emails you get from these gurus out there. I mean, most of them are full of shit. They're trying to sell you a product, get money out of your pocket, and then you still don't know what the heck you're going to end up doing, or the property's not represented correctly. It's not a full 360 system like we're going to talk about today. So real quick, we're going to go through a few case studies. First one is a property we worked on last year. This one in Algonquin. This is basically, I'm going to show you some before photos and some after photos, and we're going to look at how this deal kind of went down. So here's what the property looked like the day we bought it. Interior, more interior, and another shot. Here's some photos we're going to show you after we sold the property. I should say the day we sold the property to another investor. Yes, that's no glitch there. Those are the same pictures. We didn't do anything to that property other than empty it out. We did a trash out with one of the contractors we work with, Tim from TMJ Asset Services. But ultimately, we bought this property in April of 17. I'm sorry, it's 2 years ago now. And then we sold it 4 months later for a $70,000 difference from when we bought it. So purchased for 40, sold for 110. We did list this property on the MLS for 119,000, ended up accepting that offer and closing with an investor at 110,000. This is the actual master statement on that property, showing the day we sold it. Bought for 40, sold for 110. Ultimately, we did end up working with an investor on that one. He was the end buyer. He ended up putting some money into it. And ended up selling it himself for $224,000 about a year later.
So it was a good deal for him too, really.
Yeah, it
at
was.
110.
Yeah, I think this guy was he wasn't a newer investor. He was some type of contractor. He worked on it himself. He had a small crew there. Took a little bit of time for him, but ultimately, yeah, it was a good deal. So this is the pictures off of Zillow. That was the end result of this rehab for this contractor. It came out really nice, much different than what we saw in the before pictures. So Dan likes to call this the triple play, because not only did we make some money, make some good money, he also put some money into it, made some good money as well. You could see those stats on this screenshot right off of Zillow.
You know, and there's some reasons, like some people might be asking, well, holy cow, I mean, if you picked up this place at 40, why wouldn't you have done the full rehab and realized the full 224 yourself? And, you know, sometimes it's best just to take the quick money and move on. We don't always take on the project. This particular house was in a floodplain, and it had kind of a weird, not zoning, but weird survey issue where the neighbor's yard property literally was like 8 feet off the back deck, and that could have caused some problems later. So, you know, the buyer that bought it was fully aware of those things. It was just something at the time we didn't really want to get involved in. And again, if you can make flip money without doing the flip, sometimes that's a nice way to go.
All right, we're going to go through another case study. So this is a property in Palatine. We purchased at the end of 2017. Before photos. There's the interior. And this is the day we bought it and what it looked like. Here's the day we sold it shortly thereafter.
Joe, those look like the same pictures.
Yeah, that's because they are. The food was still rotting in the fridge on the day we sold it. We didn't even touch this property. We did not remove anything from it. We left everything in it and sold it. Here is the day we purchased it. Here's the closing statement showing the purchase price of $105,000. And this is the day we sold it. Looks like a couple months later. Same property, sold it for $165,000. Didn't touch it. Didn't do anything to it. We visited a few times. Thought about cleaning some of it out, but didn't do anything. Just sold it on the MLS as a wholesale deal, as we're going to touch on.
The neighbor called. She wanted to know if we were going to rake the leaves because the company was coming over to clear off her yard, and she was afraid the leaves from our house were going to blow into hers. And
right.
We didn't quite get around to doing that.
No. So again, just showing you public records. This is off of Zillow. In case you need more evidence, we actually sold this property for $5,100 more than what I listed it for. I was on the market for, what was that show? We had it a couple weeks before we listed it, and we had it under contract 2 days after listing and sold it about a month later.
Yeah, and it was one of those bring your highest and best, which is always nice.
Right. Another case study, 988 Howard and Addison. You get the picture, right? Same situation. We didn't clean it out. Didn't need anything done on our end. We bought it for $140,000. Sold it for $209,000 shortly thereafter, a couple months later. We didn't clean it out. We didn't do any work to it. Just listed it on the MLS after we purchased it ourselves. Bought it for $140,000, sold for $209,900. Not a bad deal. So this is something we put together last year when we were proposing some of this material out to other investors who might be interested in working with us. There are some of the margins we made. Gross profits, $264,000. We averaged about $53,000 per deal. That is no more.
Yeah, that was 2017.
And this is some of what we've been up to this year, or I should say last year, 2018. Property in Harvard, we bought for $30,000, sold it for $60,000. Same situation. I know we met the code inspector out there a few times because this was actually a fire damaged house. But beyond that, we didn't clean it up. We didn't do anything. This is a property in Elgin Dan actually closed on from another investor who we've met through networking, where we purchased it for $68,000. Put about $30,000 worth of work into it, give or take. I don't remember. And the ARV on it, the current value of that property is $175,000, and we rented it for $1,750 a month.
Yeah, and I think the key there is something you alluded to earlier in the show, Joe, is you talked about how at the end of the day, we're real estate investors. So we're looking to buy properties, and we're not so bold as to think that, well, if it's a deal that we didn't find or we didn't come up with, that it isn't worth buying. This is a perfect example of a nice deal that somebody brought to us, and we saw the value in it, so we jumped on it right away.
Yep. Next property is one in Park Ridge. We never actually visited this property. We got it under contract and purchased it for $100,000. We sold it for $235,000. It was as is. There was no work completed. We never went inside the house. That's why this is actually a Google Street screenshot, because we never went to the property.
And when you say no work completed, I mean, that was a summer house, and frankly, we didn't even cut the grass over there.
Yeah, we didn't do anything.
Like, that's literally, I mean, we did nothing.
So just to show you another triple play opportunity, there's our Zillow record again, showing $100,000 purchase. There's our sale price of $235,000 about a month and a half later, and then the builder who bought it actually, I believe, knocked it down and put a new single family home there, which is currently listed as of December 23rd for $899,000. Here's another example, kind of a front before and after photo. 180 North Main, Crystal Lake. We purchased this one for $82,000. We put quite a bit of rehab into it. It was a very old home. It was a 2-unit. Had contractors working there for 6 to 8 months, if I recall correctly, a little bit of break in between. And we sold that one for $228,000. Again, you can kind of see the purchase price and the sale price there about a year later. It was a long rehab on that one. Another one in Carpentersville, we purchased for $50,000. We did clean it out, and we ended up selling it for $100,000 in as-is condition. 703 Riverview in Algonquin. We actually took this one down as a subject to opportunity. So a brief explanation of what that is we came to the table with no money down. We received a deed from the seller, which we recorded into a land trust. The existing mortgage on the property, which is about $86,000 or so, still stayed in place, is still currently in place. We're making payments on that mortgage while we own this property. It was rehab in process as of a couple months ago, or actually, I think when we made this PowerPoint. That is no longer the case. It's now under contract to be sold for $118,000 after we invested about $12,000 worth of rehab and expenses, holding costs into it. So basically that puts us all in just shy of $100,000 of all of our costs, and we're selling it for $118,000. So not a home run like you've seen on some of these other slides, but definitely a base hit. Make some money on that one. Here's another one on Grove and Elgin. We bought it for $68,000 roughly, give or take. We sold it for $105,000 a couple months later, and again, just did a clean out of the property because it was filled with stuff, filled to the gills.
Yeah, the basement was jam-packed on that one.
Yes. So again, I said 68. I keep screwing this up, but on the PowerPoint, this is actually the Zillow readout showing that we purchased it for $65,000, listed it for $104,900, and sold it for $105,000. So this is kind of a screenshot of what we've done in the last year, and some of those numbers compared to what that original sheet was I showed you. So our gross profits, well, more importantly, we bought properties in the amount of roughly $872,000 in acquisitions, and when we sold those same properties, it was $1.5 million. So we're basically doubling that amount when we sell those properties either through a flip or some type of wholesale opportunity. Our gross profit, $477,000, average per deal just shy of $60,000 per deal, which is about $7,000 more than the previous year.
And the key on this too is, so many times this is what I call the chest thumping sessions that you see on Facebook or even with some of the local investors at RIA meetings. There's a lot of focus that I find from people with regards to how many deals are you doing a month? Like somehow that's the gauge. And, I know plenty of investors that are doing wholesale deals at $1,000, $2,500, $5,000 on a contract assignment. And that's a far cry from a deal average of near $60,000 a deal. So, it's been my experience over time, and, Joe's seen this on deals we've done, that you wish you could say that the deals where you're going to make, $5,000 were going to be so much easier and you could do so many more of them. But the reality is, it's all the same steps and all the same wrinkles and all the same things that could possibly come up due as ones where you're going to make giant money. So it's not that we avoid the small deals, but we, tend to try to spend our time and energy on the things that'll bring us the most return, because at the end of the day, time is our most valuable resource. So if we're spinning our wheels looking at a bunch of thin margin properties that are going to be hard to do anything with, that doesn't really get us to where we're trying to get to.
Yes. All right. So you saw what we've done, and now we're going to talk a little bit about what we're up to now. Again, based off of what we've done in the last few months here, we've got a house in Bartlett. We're in the middle of rehabbing. It's actually getting wrapped up. Today's Friday. It'll be wrapped up at some point in the coming week here. Appliances were delivered yesterday. Granite goes in tomorrow. We have another flip in Algonquin. Same situation, getting wrapped up here in the next week. I had the appliances delivered there as well yesterday, and the granite was installed yesterday as well. So that actually came from our previous class that we taught, the same class we're talking about today that we're going to get into here momentarily. One of the investors that took that course has done probably about a half a dozen deals since taking our class, and we were lucky enough to partner with him on this one and provide the funding for it, as well as the guidance to get the rehab completed. We've got another property in Algonquin that's currently under contract as a flip that we've already finished and is going to be closing in January this year, 2019. We've got a house in McHenry that is currently listed that we picked up off market that we just threw on the MLS, waiting to close, or waiting to sell, I should say. We've got another, we've got a 2-unit out in Kingston, which if you don't know where that is, don't bother looking it up. It's far enough away that you probably don't care, but it's in between Rockford and Elgin, we'll call it. But we've got that one listed on the MLS. So real quick, we're going to talk about our latest deal, which we're pretty proud of. For those of you that are interested in hearing more about maybe the long-term play instead of the short-term game of flipping, we just bought 5 condos as a package deal from one seller in Rosemont. 2 studios, 2 1-bedrooms, and 1 2-bedroom condo. So we're going to dive into the numbers a little bit. This is pretty important for you to pay attention to. We bought all 5 of these condos for a total of $175,000. Which is a pretty sweet deal.
Mm-hmm.
We've got our rehab budget set at about $15,000 per unit to fix these up. And that's about $75,000 total in rehab costs for these, which puts us in our all-in cost of acquisition and rehab, plus some of the ancillary expenses, which aren't included in this, which would be utilities and things of that nature, but roughly $250,000 all-in cost for these 5 condos. And when they're done and fixed up and they're rented out or flipped, the value is about $500,000. Not a bad deal.
Not a bad deal at all.
Boom.
That's what I'm talking about.
So we showed you those flip numbers, which has about a $250,000 margin if we were to sell them. If we decide to keep them, which is what our plan is as of today, is those 5 units, after they're fixed up, after it's refinanced with a new loan on them, that'll bring in an average net income from those 5 properties or those 5 condos of just about $3,000 a month of net income, not gross. So that's cash flow in your pocket per month. Any type of deal like this, what we love about these is it's dealer's choice. We can flip them, we can wholesale it, we could rent them out, multiple exit strategies. So it really depends as an investor. Do you want the now money and sell it for a quick profit, or do you want the forever money of $3,000 a month as a rental? We're choosing the forever money. So this all kind of circles back to the point that we started out, we built our own system, and then we built a business out of it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how that business works and why it might be important to you as a real estate investor or wholesaler or someone who's looking for property in Chicago. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about how to actually wholesale correctly.
Well, so that's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because when you're in investing circles and you're speaking with other investors at RIA meetings or on the phone or what have you, oftentimes we talk about the fact that we have properties to sell, and that's probably okay in the right circles. But it's very important that you understand the right way to do things. And the reality is you can't wholesale or you can't sell something that you don't own. So essentially, when we do contract assignments, we are not selling properties. We are selling our equitable interest, which is represented by a contract. So you have a contract that you're selling, not a property. That's important because if you start loosely talking about how you're putting buyers and sellers together, and depending on how you're describing what it is you're doing when you're out with friends and family, you never know who's a licensed realtor that really has no concept of what we're talking about here. And the National Association of Realtors, they run a pretty robust lobby in Washington, and people that are licensed have gone through a lot of time and training and classes in order to get their license. So I think we can all appreciate that they don't take kindly to some people out there brokering without a license. So that's the key. That's what we're trying to avoid. So again, we're marketing contracts, not properties. The act of finding an off-market property, which, by the way, regardless of all the things that you've done in your business or Joe and I have done in our business last year, as we move into 2019, if we choose to be considered wholesalers or flippers or buy and hold investors, frankly, we're not going to be any one of those things without property acquisition. So as long as we got to acquire some properties in order to run our business, we might as well try to find them at the absolute cheapest prices and get the best deals possible. And that's always by going directly to the owners. Much in the same way when it comes to food and eating, they talk about how to get the most nutrition and the things that are best for you, you want to get as close to the earth as possible. So fruits and vegetables and things that grow out of the ground are obviously better for us than Twinkies and Cheetos and things that are processed and man-made in a factory. Same thing with real estate. So the 5-step process to finding the off-market deals that we have worked on is, number one, you have to do some marketing for the properties. 2, people are going to call, so you got to take those calls and talk to the sellers and try to figure out what the situation is and what's causing them to want to sell a house and what kind of time frame they're looking to get it sold in, and gather some information about the condition and all that. And that's kind of how you're pre-qualifying the lead to see if it's something worth following up on. On this kind of thing, I would say that when you're new, the expectation is you're trying to desperately figure out how every phone call coming in is possibly a deal. And the reality is most of them aren't going to be. It's just the nature of what we do. Again, we're working in a very narrow sliver niche of the market, probably less than 5% of all transactions Our cash deals that are done at discount prices. We kind of run a pawn shop here, right? We can buy the property, we can get it done quickly, but we're not retail buyers, and we have to treat this as an investment. So that's why we have to pre-qualify these leads. The next step is to go on the appointment and actually see the house, meet with the owner, and work and stay long enough to get that property under contract at a price that's going to make sense for our purposes as investors. And then lastly, we got to get those deals closed. Joe and I co-own Investors Title Service. We work with investors throughout the Chicago area, and we help them facilitate those closings and transaction management. We do contract assignments, double closes, and all those things. So if you have deals and you are not closing them efficiently, and if you're not trying to save some money on those closings, you might want to talk to us and see how we might be able to work with you to tighten that up on your behalf. We have a contract that we've used on all our deals, and we've shared it with many investors throughout the Chicago area. It's a very simple contract. It's a 2-page thing. Frankly, a third grader could read it and understand it, and that's the simplicity and that's the beauty of it. If you'd like a copy of that, send an email to Joe, or for that matter, Dan, at investorstitleservicesllc.com. And we will send you by email not only a copy of the contract, but also the assignment agreement that we use in our business. While we have it here, we're going to go through it. I'm going to show you exactly what it is and what some of the psychological hacks that are kind of built into this. Like I said, it's 2 pages. So here's page 1. Let it be known that the undersigned, your name, or LLC and or assigns is the buyer. This is what gives you the ability to assign that contract to an end buyer. You agree to purchase from owner of record or the person who's on title, real estate known as 123 Main Street in whatever town, county, state, and zip code. When I sit down with sellers, I normally kind of just pass right by the purchase price and come back to that later. I want them to know that we're going through the contract, and I want their buy-in along the way. So oftentimes, even if I know the zip code of the property in question, I'll ask them, hey, what's the zip code here again? And when they tell it to me, I write it down, and that kind of engages them and lets them know that, I am in the process of, in fact, writing up an offer right before their very eyes. The next 3 things, and you see the first one there I already have crossed out. Frankly, I cross the first 3 out, and I do it on every contract. So the question might be, well, gee, Dan, if you cross those 3 things out on every contract, why not just leave them out? And the whole idea here is that we're trying to give the idea to people that we're doing some special things for them that frankly we may not be doing for other people that we buy houses from. So that's why we cross them out. It makes it a little more personal, and it customizes it to their property. So the first one is that the offer is subject to the buyer obtaining a mortgage. And because this is going to be a cash deal and we're not going to be getting a mortgage, which, by the way, lessens the possibility of deals closing, because a lot of times their financing falls through. So when you're making a cash offer, that makes your offer way more viable to a seller. So we go ahead and cross that out. The second one is subject to the buyer obtaining a home inspection. And, this is a place where people often hire a $500 home inspector to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a property and looking for every possible thing wrong in an effort to come back and look for a price reduction later. So I point that out, and that we don't do that. And then lastly, because we're going to buy direct from the seller off market, there isn't going to be a realtor commission to pay, which is paid by the seller, which is customary, and they're not going to have to pay for that either. So we cross those things out. I kind of skim by the next 2 things, which Of course, they're going to sell it with a marketable title. And if the deal falls through, they're going to get to keep the earnest money, which we haven't filled in yet, but, I usually put $100. The closing shall occur on or before, we write in 30 business days. 30 business days. I say it as I write it down. They hear me say 30. They read that I wrote 30, but the reality is 30 business days is actually 45 days. So if you're looking to wholesale the property, it gives you a little extra time to market it to your buyers list, etc. The difference being is if you wrote down 45, that just sounds like a long ways away, and 30 is a time frame that people seem most comfortable with. Point 7 there is talking about how it's going to close, and it's going to close with investor title. As the buyer, you get to control the closing and where it's going to close. Number 8 is your out clauses. So just in case you're unable to find that end buyer, it's subject to the buyer's inspection and approval of the property prior to the transfer of title. It's also subject to your financial partner's approval. So if you can't find a financial partner, then you can't complete the deal, obviously. And the key part beyond that is that we're going to need keys, or we're going to need some way to get into the property so that we can show it to our buyers and potential buyers. So we kind of position that we need to bring in contractors to get estimates and repairs estimates and things like that so that we can hit the ground running once we do close. We prorate the taxes at 105%. Because in Illinois, taxes are paid a year in the arrears, and the likelihood that the taxes next year are going to be more expensive than this year. So we go ahead and claw that tax increase ahead at the time of closing. Let's talk about the assignment agreement that we use. Again, same with the contract. Because of the title company, we see an awful lot of contracts and assignment agreements that come through. None of them are bad. We just happen to like the ones we use because they're simple, and we've never had a deal not closed because there wasn't enough detail in that contract that we've presented. The whole idea of keeping it simple is that if it gets too complicated, then people are likely to not be ready to make a decision while you're sitting with them, and they're likely to feel the need to run it by their attorney before they sign anything. And that's a deal breaker, but that can certainly cause a wrinkle. I can personally tell you about a story where I had a seller that lived kitty corner from my mother-in-law in Arlington Heights, and he took my contract to his attorney to review it. And when the attorney saw the price that the seller was going to sell it to me for, the attorney turned around and bought it himself, and today that attorney lives in that house. So I kind of got snaked out of a deal right there because the seller didn't sign it before he took it to the attorney. Here's the assignment of contract. So for the value received, the undersigned, which is your company. So in my case, it's Riverside Hope. That's my company as the assigner and holder of the contract. We put the day that contract was signed between myself and the seller, and then I'm going to then assign over to my end buyer as the assignee. The key of this whole thing right here is the assignee agrees to purchase the property for X dollars. And then below that, I write it out like you would on a check. The whole idea here is we're not negotiating the assignment and how much we're going to make. The property itself is going to cost the buyer, let's say $100,000. And if we have it under contract for 80, that 20,000 will end up being the assignment fee, but we don't put it on paper exactly how much that's going to be. It just says the balance of the funds will be the assignment fee. Lastly, the assignee, we're looking for our buyers to give us a $5,000 non-refundable deposit. And this is critical because, especially if you're working with buyers that are accustomed to only buying their properties on the MLS, typically what they do is they make a lot of blind lowball offers. And if they get one accepted, then they go check out the property to see if they can make the numbers work. And they have a 5-day attorney review and a 10-day inspection period to do that. And frankly, as wholesalers, we don't have that kind of time, because if you have it under contract and it's going to be even the 45-day close, and it's taking you 2 weeks to find someone that says they want it, and then they tie it up for another 10 days and only to decide they don't want it, now you're back to square one and the clock's ticking, and it's going to make it difficult to get this deal done. So we typically tell people to take all the time they need to do their due diligence and run their numbers and their repair estimates, etc. But when they decide they want that house, it's a $5,000 non-refundable deposit. So that way, if the deal happens to fall through, at least we're still going to make $5,000. And I can tell you, in all the time we've been doing this, we've only had one situation where that happened and the deal didn't close. And the reality is, when you're asking people for $5,000, that's going to get rid of your tire kickers. It's going to get rid of your people that think they're going to wholesale your deal, daisy chain it and all that stuff. So $5,000 is basically where the rubber meets the road. The other thing that we're able to do here at Investor Title is on double closes, we're used the C buyer's money to close the A to B transaction. If you do that other places where you'll need transactional funding, typically you can expect that to cost you probably $500 or $750 application fee, and typically 2 points, which is 2% of the money that you're going to use, even though you're going to only use it for a couple hours. So that's how we do the A to B to C closings. Typically, we recommend that if your profit margin is going to be north of $10,000. And again, sometimes it depends on the price of the property. Sometimes we see these city deals where someone's buying a property for $14,000 and then they're about to make $20,000 assigning it to somebody. And you can see how that might rub a seller wrong when that comes to light, when they own a property and they're only going to get 14 and you sold somebody a contract and made 20. And that can be a reason the deal blows up right at the closing table. So sometimes the reason we do this is we just want to insulate the profit from the seller and the buyer. Sometimes everybody likes the deal until they find out that someone else is going to be making a bunch of money. And then for some reason, they don't like the deal as much. So we really just try to protect people from themselves, I guess I'd call it. That's why we do double closes. The other thing that we do is handle the transaction management in Investor Title. So we have an attorney that we work closely with, not on our staff, but on a contract basis. So if you have deals, by all means, get a hold of us. We'll put you in touch with the right attorney that can get this thing to the finish line. That can be important when you're doing a wholesale deal in particular, because remember, attorneys are paid and hired to work in their client's best interest. So if you've assigned a contract, at that point, there's no real reason for you to go to closing. So now you've got a buyer and a seller and 2 attorneys at a closing table. And I've heard stories where a couple of attorneys decide to eliminate that assignment fee, if you will, and the buyer pays $5,000 less and the seller gets $5,000 more if it was going to be a $10,000 assignment. And the wholesalers in the middle left out. And they do that to protect their clients, and because they know that you're not going to do anything about it. Because as an investor and as a wholesaler, frankly, it's going to cost more than $10,000 in attorney fees and court costs to try to recoup the $10,000 that you lost. So it basically just becomes a lost opportunity. It's not a very moral and ethical way to do business, but if you're not there and you're not being represented, these are the kind of things that don't happen often, but the possibility exists that they can happen. So with all that said, Joe and I, for the second time now, are going to host this class from the kitchen table to the closing table. It's the art of off-market property acquisition. It's going to be January 12th and 13th. It's going to be 9 to 4 both days, but frankly, our commitment is we're going to stay as long as we need to on Sunday to make sure that people's have every question answered, every I dotted, every T crossed, because it's our goal at this class is that by the time you leave here, there are no stones unturned, and that you have all the answers to everything you think you need to be able to go out and start taking action right away on Monday morning. You know, I can tell you personally, I've been to a lot of these events, and I always pick up, quote, a couple nuggets out of them. And when I was new, I would come home and scratch my head and I'd say, well, what about this? They didn't talk about that. So we spend an awful lot of time on those things. You know, those 5 steps that I laid out earlier are pretty fundamentally simple. I said they're not easy. So we spend an awful lot of time talking about how to talk to sellers, how to bond with people, how to get people to sign contracts at the prices we want to sign them at, what we should wear on the appointments. We go through all sorts of things. It takes all day. Here's a quick clip from some folks that came to the class. We did it once before. We did it last year.
I don't know.
Did it last year.
Tonight we're going to talk about wholesaling, and specifically this workshop is going to be about getting from the kitchen table to the closing table.
Last year.
Tonight we're going to talk about.
That's not going to work. Listen on yours and see if it's working.
Workshop is going to be about getting from the kitchen table.
Wait, no, leave that.
Last year. Tonight we're going to talk about.
No, it's not on yours and see if it's working. Another technical difficulty, I guess.
So you have to just unmute that.
No, that's not going to work. All right, we're going to skip over this part.
That's right. So the reality is if you go to the website, kitchen closing.com, you'll be able to see that quick video. But basically that's, I mean, I have to be honest with you, I'm pretty blown away by all the people that were willing to stay because, like we said, we were planning to stay till 4 o'clock last year on Sunday, and we didn't end up ending till 6. And at 6 o'clock, there was half the class who was willing to wait their turn to say some nice things about their experience at the class. And so that's what that little video is, and you can watch that at kitchen2closing.com.
Yeah.
So what is some of the stuff we're going to go through at the class, Joe?
So when we hosted this class originally, obviously we kind of did it because we realized there was a need in the market to help teach people or educate people about how to find these opportunities, but also how to transact them correctly. And that became evident when we started our title company and continued to host our meetups about the number of phone calls and attendees that we would come in contact with that literally were about 50% there on what they needed to do, whether that was their direct mail or their marketing, or maybe they ended up getting something under contract and they couldn't figure out what to do next. And along with the general aspect of the class teaching about wholesaling and finding off market opportunities, it's more than that. I mean, we're going to cover and hand out and give you our systems and our worksheets that we use for what creates those type of profits we showed you previously in this presentation. One of those being the maximum allowable offer worksheet. So you know what type of numbers you need to offer on some of these properties in order to make a profit, which you can basically set yourself. We're also have live seller calls that we're going to take on site. So our marketing is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether it's through bandit signs or direct mail or online marketing, things of that nature. And when the phone rings on January 12th and 13th, and we're in the classroom together, we're going to answer the phone live and actually speak to the sellers in front of you so you can hear how that communication needs to happen and how to properly handle live seller phone calls. We're going to talk about what motivates a seller to actually pick up the phone and call us, and what you need to respond with when they do. We're going to offer and work on scripts as a group. So we have scripts that we use. We have a template that you're going to be able to access as a result of attending the class through our answering service, and what scripts you can use for your own business. The secret first impressions that you need to make if you want to leave that meeting with the seller with a contract, which is always the goal. If we're going to drive out to a property, it's not just to look at it. We're going to drive out to that property with the intention of leaving with a contract. 81 plus ways to find off-market deals. This is huge, actually. We've been compiling a list for years on all the different ways you can find off-market opportunities. We're going to go over that, and a lot of them are free, no cost. Working with the 4 different personality types of different sellers and how to handle them.
I mean, I think I want to kind of highlight that because, on the front end, we're real estate investors and we want to buy houses. But the reality is, at the end of the day, we're really in the people business, and people do business with people they like and people that they trust. And so we're going to talk about all the things that makes, the goal when we go to see people is that the impression that they should have is that they would be an absolute fool to do business with anybody but me when I'm there. And we're going to talk about how we get there.
Right. All right. We're also going to talk about responding to the seller objections that you're going to hear as a real estate investor when you're coming to their property and offering them less than they'd like to sell for. The reduction to the ridiculous. So I keep forgetting what this is, but now I think I've finally learned it. This is one of Dan's tactics, but basically taking the amount that the differences between what you want to offer and what they want to sell for, and reducing it down to what that breaks down over the course of a year, a month, and the cost per day. So if you don't accept my offer for $10,000 less than what you're looking for, that basically equates to the cost of a cup of coffee per day. We're going to go over that in detail. That's called the reduction to the ridiculous. The meeting the owner mindset. One of the things we've noted, because we've also dealt with other wholesalers that have tried to or were interested in buying some of our properties. The way you actually show up and speak to the owner when you're on site and what you need to prepare for before you actually knock on the front door, ring that doorbell. The 4% factor.
Well, what we have to try to do is separate ourselves from other people that may or may not be going to visit with these sellers. And this is so true in so many things, is that, how just a little percentage different makes all the difference. There's a long story about horse racing, but, just real simply, think about the Olympics. When you're watching some of those track meets and swimming in particular, it seems like the difference between a gold medal, a silver, a bronze, and not being recognized at all, it can boil down to a second or a second and a half. And it's that much of a difference. That's the difference between winning and losing. So the whole idea is that when we're out to see these people, we don't have to be twice as good or 10 times as good as somebody else. We just have to do a few things a little different and a little better. And at the end of the day, it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, some of these deals, and if I wasn't personally involved in them, I would have a hard time believing that they actually happened. But that Palatine house that Joe took you through, the one we bought for 105 and turned around and sold for 165, on that initial phone call with the seller says she thought the property was worth probably 235, but would be willing to sell it for 200. And after I went there and spent some time, and that's actually the truth is I actually had to go back there twice. The first time she had to run out and go to the dentist, and she forgot and almost tried to cancel on me, but I was almost all the way there. So I said, well, let's just, meet and you can show me the house real quick. And then we can get together again. But that house ended up going from the 200 she said she would sell it for to 105 by the time I got done talking to her. So that was pretty exciting. That's all part of that 4% factor.
We're also going to go over and look at real yellow letters that actually achieve success in our market. That includes a library of marketing that we've not only created, but also marketing we've obtained from other investors, and what you're going to see out there when you get into this side of the business, and how to work on that and improve upon it. So the real yellow letters that actually create success. We're going to walk you through how to build your direct mail list from start to finish. So depending on what your monthly budget is, it can be as little as 50 or 100 mailers per month to as many as 10,000. We're going to talk about KPIs, which stands for Key Performance Indicator, and how to evaluate it. But in short, what is actually making your business money once you start marketing for off-market opportunities. We're also going to talk about bandit signs, and this is a screenshot of an app we use to track the locations of where we are placing our signs that basically say "We Buy Houses." We've used different versions. Currently, it says "Annie Buys Houses," but those are called bandit signs. And this is a screenshot from an app that we use that actually shows the location of where that bandit sign has been placed. And that includes a photo of that location, which basically ties in a GPS location and shows us on a map where we currently have signs out.
And a date and time stamps it as well.
Yeah, that's right. So part of that is we're going to go over the when, where, how, and why, and the tracking of a successful bandit sign campaign. That's huge because that brings in a lot of phone calls. So we're also going to go over repair estimation for successful rehab numbers. That's going to include potentially a visit to properties that we're involved in right now, so we can actually live, have the classroom in the setting of an opportunity of a rehab property or sitting down with a seller. So we have that scheduled to visit a property. We're just figuring out exactly the timeline of when that's going to fall into the 2-day class. How to obtain the most accurate after repaired value on your deals. And that's going to cover aspects that don't include the MLS. So how do you come up with a number on what a property is going to be worth when you don't have access to the MLS or you're not working with a realtor? There are ways to do that. We're going to cover at length direct mail campaigns, how to start them, how to manage them, and how to get deals deals through them as a result. And then wholetailing, which we touched on a little bit today in those case studies. How do you do it and why do you do it? We're going to go over that as well. Some of the more important stuff we're going to cover on day 2, which is going to be the actual seller meeting, what to bring, what to wear, and believe it or not, what to do before you even knock on that door, because there are a couple key things that we like to teach people to do before they meet with that seller. Knowing your audience, basically what type of person are you going to be dealing with when you're sitting down at that kitchen table, how to understand them and how to react appropriately when you're in the middle of a conversation with them about to make an offer on their property. And then the credibility kit. We're going to get into that at length, but this is huge as being a real estate investor, basically providing proof that you are a closer and that you've bought property in the past, and we can assist you with putting yours together as well.
We talk about the kitchen table, and just in case you're not sure why we have called it that, one of the really key strategies for getting these deals done is doing it in a place where people feel comfortable and where people talk about vacations, talk about finances, talk about life decisions. And that usually doesn't happen next to the leaky water heater in the basement or sitting in the living room where they're relaxed and watch TV and enjoy time with family and friends. Seems like around the kitchen table is when people think and talk about those kind of things. So when we steer people to that kitchen table, it puts them in a place where they're basically, ready to do business. And so we're going to talk about, how to get them there, what to do once you get them into the kitchen. We're going to cover all those things as well at the class.
Okay. We're also going to talk about when you're setting up your wholesale business, creating partnerships, working with other potential investors or current wholesalers and investors, co-wholesaling and how that works and how you can protect your interest in a co-wholesale opportunity. Finding funding for your deals. Another huge topic that we're going to cover is how to actually obtain the funding to close on some of these properties if that type of opportunity presents itself and creates the best exit strategy for you. And how to orchestrate these deals. Basically, the start to finish of how the chips need to fall in order to make sure that you're going to end up getting this deal to the closing table from start to finish. So I know there's some people that are watching this that are thinking this isn't really going to be my thing. I'm just looking to be involved in real estate and invest and buy property. I'm not really interested in sitting down and meeting with sellers. Maybe you're more of a deal analyzer and not so much somebody that wants to sit down with a seller and try to negotiate a deal. You like scrubbing numbers. I call those people paper persons and not people persons. And that's kind of more like me. So one of the solutions we have for that type of situation is if you're going to work with others, you can be the backbone of the business by running it, funding it, marketing, setting up the systems. So what do we really get out of this opportunity? What can you expect? And I think there's some pretty cool stuff here. A lot of the people that have already signed up aren't even 100% aware of what we're offering. So I want to make sure you guys pay attention to this. There's a program out there called Chicago Deal Vault. It's basically a software platform that not only offers public record databases so you can search out some of those lists we talk about, like the eviction list and the absentee owner list, which is basically landlords. This program is going to be offered to all the attendees for 6 months for free as a result of coming to our class. And that is honestly a $600 value because it's $100 a month if you want to join Chicago Deal Vault today. But if you take the class, you're going to get 6 months free as a result of attending as one of our students. You're going to learn how Deal Vault, which is Chicago Deal Vault that I just mentioned, will be your main source for off-market data. And we're going to have a special VIP session in the evening of the first day of the class, which is going to be Saturday, January 12th, where the creator of Deal Vault is going to come out and actually walk you through how to use it so you can take advantage of that free 6 months you have. We're going to guarantee 2 personal one-on-one strategy sessions. So this is basically going to be a 1-hour consult at 2 separate occasions after taking the class to either help you get started, help walk you through a deal personally, assist you in any way we can to get your business off the ground and running and successful in the Chicago market. And then something I came up with, which is called the First Deal Guarantee. And obviously, no such thing as a first. About this? So the First Deal Guarantee is you bring us your first deal. We're gonna walk you through that situation to get it to the closing table, because I know you can sit in that classroom for 12 hours a day and take as many notes as you want and frankly record the whole thing, and it still doesn't result in a transaction or money in your pocket. So after your marketing is started, when the phone starts ringing and you have that opportunity, we're going to walk you through how to get it done. That's guaranteed.
That's huge.
It is huge. So just to recap the class, it is going to be held January 12th and 13th, 9 to 5 approximately. We put 9 to 4 on here as well. We don't exactly know at what point with questions and answers and different situations if it's going to go a little bit longer. So plan on a full day. We're also offering that VIP session for Chicago Deal Vault at 6 p.m. that evening, Saturday, January 12th, which is going to walk you through that software package you get for 6 months free. We're actually originally hosting it at our offices here in Algonquin. We're gonna have to open that up to a larger location, so we did have a plan B. So it's going to be at a hotel in the area in a conference room. We're going to update that information as soon as we can, which is going to hopefully be in the next couple of days. So if you're interested in signing up, we normally charge $14.95 for this class. Today or tonight if you're watching this in the evening. Only price is $995 by using coupon code MEETUP. And that's going to provide you with a discount when you actually go to our website, type in the coupon code while you're entering in the transaction. It'll knock $500 off the price. So if you're interested in signing up, which I hope the attendees are, the website is www.kitchentoclosing.com. That's a number 2 between kitchen and closing, kitchen to closing. Use coupon code MEETUP and you knock $500 off the regular price of $1,495.
I mean, think about it. Some of these deals that we showed you in the deal average, there's a large portion of America that any one of those deals would be considered a good year earning at a job somewhere. And the nice thing about learning this skill set is this is a skill set you can use locally, or frankly, if you decided to move to Tuscaloosa next year, you could put the same skills to work and be up and running in no time in any market that you should choose to live.
Yep, I agree. So again, for those of you that are interested, we only have a couple seats left in the class. So this is kind of our last ditch effort to fill a couple of those seats. Please let us know if you have any questions. We've got our phone numbers on here, which you can call us at any time. We'd be happy to help you answer any of those questions. And I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a few minutes, but feel free to also ask any questions in the chat box below here on YouTube if you do have any.
Thanks for attending.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a question from Michael. Oh, man, haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, so as far as the purposes of this, I got to read this out loud. I'm sorry. This question's from Michael. It says, Joe and Dan, can you please share what you're spending each month on marketing, SEO, answering services, etc.? Yeah, so I can tell you as a ballpark number, it's between $5,000 and $7,000 per month for all those services. But there's more tied to it than just the marketing and answering the phone. We've got systems in place. We've got software we're using. We have an answering service. We have a follow-up campaign and a CRM. All those things, because of the scale of our business, are allowing us to spend that kind of money. For those of you that are just getting started, though, I think is more maybe where Michael was getting at. This can be done on a very limited budget if you're willing to commit the time to mailing your own letters or putting out your own bandit signs and just answering the phone. I mean, in theory, a couple $100 a month can get you started. So, and that number is completely scalable, as I mentioned earlier. So I know there's wholesalers out there, a lot of them you may even be familiar with that are, hosting podcasts or on Bigger Pockets, things like that. And they're spending $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month and closing, 200 or 300 deals per year. So I would say if you're going to get into this, plan on whatever you can spend for at least a 6-month campaign, whether that includes a cell phone bill, paper and stamps and envelopes. That's up to you, but come up with that number and just commit to it.
And there's ways to get there too, because initially it's pretty easy to think, well, I don't have any money for that. And then you realize, well, I don't need to stop at Starbucks for coffee every day. And I maybe can live without cable TV. And next thing you know, you've loosened up $200-300 a month right there. So there's other ways to be resourceful to come up with some money to get that phone ringing. The fun thing about taking those phone calls is I always like to say it's like scratch off lottery tickets. Every time that phone rings, it could be, the next 6-figure dollar deal. That's almost mind-blowing to think that, but we've seen it happen more than once now. So if lightning is struck once, it can strike again, I guess, right?
Sure, absolutely. It does. It seems to strike a few times a year, honestly.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any other questions before we wrap it up? All right, we're going to go ahead and shut down this YouTube live. Thank you to those attendees who stuck around after our technical difficulties. I will make sure we send this out as a recording to all of our meetup groups. We'll put it on our Investors Title Facebook page, and then we'll blast it out via email in general. So anyone who did not complete the entire YouTube live can actually watch it later. Thank you.
Bye.
I'm making jokes now. I don't even know how to shut this thing down. So give me a second.